Okay, hey guys, so another video coming at you. It's time for a blog post. And so the reason I'm making this video is to give some of the behind the scenes kind of content, behind the scenes look that I mentioned would be in the book, rather that I alluded to would be on my website in the back of the book. So I'm going to make this video. This is going to be the first of the behind the scenes video, and it's going to be talking about how Irobu's Odyssey came to be. So what inspired it, what it was before, what changes I made, from its earliest conceptions to the final book. And so without further ado, I'm going to start telling that story. So it first started with Dungeons and Dragons, believe it or not. So this was originally going to be my idea of a campaign. So I played D&D with my friends from high school. We still play, all these years later. And so I was going to be the dungeon master, and whatnot. And so I decided, what's one thing, right, that would make my world different. And because one of the things that I had seen, I thought was a problem with some of the Dungeons and Dragons games was that mages were kings, they were gods, and they could do anything. Whereas you get like a fighter, and they really are held back because they can attack a few times, but they can't teleport somewhere or make their own plane or whatnot. So I was trying to think up a setting of something that would be really hostile to mages, right? Something that people would see that and be like, oh no, I don't want to play a mage. No, 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 no. And so that's how kind of Trebuchus's weird enchantment that messes with magic came to be. And so then I was kind of, building a setting around that, and kind of what would a setting be like where there's really not many people using magic, right? And then I started getting into what would be the reason that, maybe there were magic in other parts of the world, but not in this one continent. Because, eventually I wanted to have people have the ability, a few people to have the ability to use magic. So that was kind of where that anti-magic and how the world first got its conception. And so for this campaign, instead of having people make their own characters and do their own backstories, which tend to be kind of weak, I was trying something new, right? And so I thought, why don't I try making a bunch of pre-made characters that have kind of backstories that tie into the world that I'm envisioning, and give people a few options, a few different classes they can pick from, see which one they pick, and then go from there. And that had a few benefits, right? It helped me flesh out the world, because I had to make characters that are from all these different places on the continent, and had all these different stories. So I had a pretty broad brush, and I could just kind of have fun and experiment with that. And so that was one thing in how the different characters came to be. And so that's how Irobu's side characters kind of got their stories. That's how Sir Griffiths, was a thing. That's how Harold started. That's how Swift started. All three of those were going to be player characters that people picked. And I had made probably 12 or something, but those were the four, including Irobu. Those are the four that people actually picked, right? And so even Irobu, right? She wasn't going to be the main character to begin with. I had no idea who the main character was going to be. But then I started in the beginning when I was first running this campaign, right? I was saying that so Irobu, the character Irobu was going to be a warlock, and she was going to have some random power that she stumbled upon in a cave in her family's mine. And so that's kind of the same rough, character arc, not character arc, but rough series of events that unfolds around her character. But the power was just going to be some unnamed thing. It was going to be some kind of throwaway type deal there. But then I kind of got a better idea of what kind of to make this more interesting, make it kind of more of a central almost character, really, because Fun's a character. So make it more of a central focal point. And so I ended up coming up with the idea of having this actually be like a conscious person who's right there, with Irobu, whether she likes it or not, right? So that's how Irobu came to be, and again, she was a player character, and I kind of fleshed her out and fleshed out a bunch of the other lore in the world. And so with that, the campaign, I did run the campaign actually, right? So it initially, at a few sessions, and so it basically started similar to how the book starts, where all these four characters, they meet up in Doncaster, they meet Master Palus, and they meet all these orphans, and it was a bit more lighthearted then. I was playing it on Roll20, and there was all sorts of kind of hijinks going on with these orphans, and how awful the castle Thalder was, how awful the castle was. So, like, there was the same three orphans. There was Petrus, the book guy. There was Todd, the quiet one, and then there was Thad, the tall, lanky guy, who cooked things, right? So those are the three orphans that kind of stayed through. And just quick kind of funny story. Just kind of tell you how a little bit of the lightheartedness has changed in that respect, right? So one of the things that they were going to do initially is have to deal. One of the first fights in the campaign was going to be them having to drop into the basement of this castle, because the orphan's sleeping area, it had all rotted away, right? And so they had to kind of cross this precarious, like wooden pilings and whatnot to get to their beds, and they were falling into the basement, and there were giant rats in the basement, right? So that was going to be one of the first things that they had to fight, and it was just kind of a bit absurd and a bit crazy, but I ended up taking Irobu's Odyssey in kind of a darker and more serious direction, right? Kind of dropping some of that black humor that was definitely prevalent in the campaign. And then I started writing the actual novel, right? I started writing the novel in April, the end of April, right when I was finishing up on finals. So I was doing this big writing project, and I was just like, I've been doing all this writing, but it's so boring, it's so dry. I just wanted to try to do something creative. And I had also had all this kind of exposure to people who had been writing books, and not even person to person exposure, but just in terms of hearing about these people. Like I took a history course, right, and I was reading about all these different women in like the 1700s who were writing books, and all these other people, and I'm like, hey, if a woman from the 1700s can write a book, then I can definitely write a book, and I just got to stick with it and power through it. And that's what I did, right? So I ended up writing, 2 pages a day, roughly from the start of May, until I think like the end of August, maybe a little bit of September. So for that 3-month span, I was writing 2 pages a day, and that's probably like 500 words, more or less, maybe 600. But I stuck with it, and so another kind of backstory thing, right? So initially, between chapters, I want to say 5 and 6, so right when Irobu goes to sleep, and she has that moment where she's wondering about, is Hakal still with her? She's kind of having that introspective moment, and then the scene ends, and then the next morning she's going to talk to Master Palus. So in between that, there was a whole different thing, a whole nother 5 chapters that I ended up excising from this book, and it's going to be in a prequel novella. And so it was a story basically of how Hakal, Irobu's god and the deity of the Senuscites, how he came to power. Because the Senuscites, as you will find out when you read this prequel novella, I should say, and what I alluded to in a few pieces of dialogue in this book is that the Senuscites weren't always so fanatical. They weren't always so devout. That's a very different change. And so there's also some kind of it kind of alludes to a lot of different things that have happened on the continent, and kind of ties in, especially in some respects, with Thrun's backstory and whatnot. So was removed because it really didn't fit there. jumping from Irobu and then to some random character for 5 chapters, and then back to Irobu, with no time in between, right? So there was just, it just didn't fit, and I ended up moving it to the beginning because like, okay, I'll just have this in the beginning, and then I'll have Irobu going, her adventure, going for the next 10, like 20 chapters. But then I came to the problem of I was originally looking for literary agents to try to get it published traditionally. And so, the literary agents, they wanted the first 1 to 5 pages. And the problem is, right, they wanted the synopsis as well. So I was thinking, they wanted the synopsis, and it all talks about Irobu because she's, the focal point. She's in 20-something of the movie, probably like 26 chapters. So to have this random character in the beginning, no relationship to the rest of the story really, in that 5 pages, it would just not really be a good indication, good representation, of what my book was about. So I ended up removing that, separating that, and it's really ready to go. I just need to, get a cover and go through the manuscript making process. So I'll probably put that out maybe in a month, 2 months, something like that. We'll see how that turns out. But that's a bit of the backstory. So I mentioned the how it began as a D&D campaign that fizzled out. Then there was the whole how I actually started writing it in terms of not wanting to give up the world. And then there was also, like I said, that portion about how I removed a whole 20,000 words from the from the middle of the book just to make it flow better and just to not dissuade or confuse the agents. So I think that's everything I want to share with you guys today. Thanks for listening, and again, thanks to everyone who's been pre-ordering and just give me their feedback. Again, I appreciate it. It's awesome. So thanks, and take care.